Could anything else possibly go wrong? It feels like this terrible period of my life just won't end. Surely things can't keep spiraling downward forever. I have to catch a break somewhere along the line. Work has become a daily struggle just to survive, and the one person I trusted more than anyone else is the one causing me the most grief. Maybe I should explain how it all began. My name is Mike Edwards. I met my wife, Batty, on my first day at Herald Engineering. I was 18, fresh out of school, nervously starting my first job a few weeks after my final exams. I had done well and could have gone to college, but I knew it wasn't for me. I'd had my fill of education, and my parents couldn't afford to support me through 3 years of university. Batty was the human resources assistant handling company inductions, and she was drop-dead gorgeous. It took me 3 months to gather enough courage to ask her out. I was convinced she would reject me, and I hadn't even thought of where to take her. But to my surprise, she said yes, and even asked where we were going. Fast forward 20 years, and unbelievably, we were both still working at the same firm. We'd also been happily married for 18 of those years. I headed the project management team while Batty had risen meteorically to become the director of human resources at the sizable engineering plant. Everything was fantastic. We had 2 great kids, Zara, 16, and Tom, 14, who were both thriving, a lovely home, and a comfortable lifestyle. Steve Hayes had been my closest friend since primary school. We became buddies with Will Fors during high school, and our friendship endured. Will's younger brother, Eric, joined our circle a few years later. Among us, Eric was the only bachelor. The rest of us were married, and our wives had known each other for years. Eric was more career-focused than the rest of us. I recommended him for a position at our company, and I was thrilled when he landed the director of operations role. It was a lucrative job, and we celebrated his success. Eric mentioned that he was surprised to get the job, as Mr. Harold had been quite tough on him during the interview. 6 months later, the 4 of us were having drinks on a Friday night when I mentioned that my wife, Batty, had been acting strangely lately. I thought one of the other wives might have mentioned something to my friends, especially if it was a health issue. But nothing had been said. My friends were concerned, agreeing that Batty's behavior was out of the ordinary. I confessed that the idea of an affair had crossed my mind. My friends didn't believe it, but they asked why I thought that way. I struggled to explain it, only saying that something just felt off. Eric hadn't spoken up until that point, but then he vigorously defended my wife. He said he worked with Batty, and there was no way she would even consider looking at another guy. Furthermore, he insisted I was foolish for ever thinking she would. I found it odd, almost like a rant, how vehemently Eric defended her. Glancing around, I could see I wasn't the only one taken aback. I recalled his flirtatious behavior with Batty, the jokes, the subtle touches, plus those business trips they'd taken together since working at the firm. I stared at him, trying to piece things together. He didn't react, but guilt started to show in his eyes, and he became visibly agitated. Will, who knew Eric better than anyone, sensed it too. Looking at his younger brother, Will said, "Please tell me you're not that stupid." Almost simultaneously, I almost shouted, "So when did you start sleeping with my wife?" We both stood. I lunged towards him, but Steve and Will managed to keep us apart. Will took his brother outside and warned him to back off. "But I'm your brother," Eric protested. "I mean it. Back off before I take matters into my own hands. You're a stupid, arrogant asshole." Steve and Will tried to calm me down, suggesting it might not be as bad as I thought, and that I should talk to Batty to get the truth. Reluctantly, I agreed and headed home. When I got there, Batty was sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. "I guess Eric called to warn you then. Is it true?" Batty didn't deny it, but she downplayed it, saying it wasn't an affair. Supposedly they messed around during a business trip, but my investigation revealed that messing around equates to cheating. She swore it was a one-time, alcohol-fueled mistake, but I wasn't convinced. I'll admit, My reaction was harsh. Whether it happened once or 100 times, cheating is cheating, and I felt completely blindsided. Batty couldn't explain her actions, and her apologies felt hollow. In the months that followed, we separated and headed for divorce. It was bad enough, but things got worse when I found out Batty was seeing Eric again. That pretty much confirmed my suspicion that there was more to it than just a one-time mistake. The pints with Steve and Will stopped. It was awkward since their wives were friends with Batty. They did ask to hang out, but I wasn't in the mood for company, and I had little money to spare. I also assumed they'd be socializing as a group, especially with Eric being Will's brother. Losing your wife to one of your best friends was a miserable experience. It felt like I had lost my entire life. Batty won custody of our 2 kids and kept our house. I knew Eric spent time there, yet I was still paying for half of the mortgage plus child support. All I could afford was a tiny flat in a rundown part of town. This didn't help with the kids. They weren't too keen to stay over and wanted to spend time with their friends who all lived near our old house. Initially, I took them out for days, spending any spare cash I had on trips, which we had all loved and done regularly since they were little. But then the conflict started. They were going on a city break with Batty and Eric, then a school trip away, then staying over with friends. It seemed like there was always an excuse. In the past 2 months, I barely saw them, and I really missed them. If it weren't for their sports activities, I might have lost touch completely. I used to always be involved in their sports events and coached them both in football. Batty never showed up, preferring to take some me time, but now both she and Eric attended everything. At halftime during Zora's football match, I asked Batty why she was there. She got defensive, saying, "They are my kids. You never bothered before." Well, I thought it would be good for the kids to see our support for them, especially through our breakup. As long as you're doing it for them, and not for yourself or to prove a point, you wouldn't be so shallow as to flaunt your new boyfriend in front of me. Don't be ridiculous. We're done, and I have no interest in you anymore. As she said that, she nestled into Eric's arm. I walked away, biting my lip yet again. Work felt like pure torture. I had to endure seeing Batty and Eric regularly. The worst part was the never-ending barrage of comments from the guys in his team. They seemed to relish in baiting me. I knew they were seeking a reaction and somehow managed to keep my temper in check. Thankfully, my team was a saving grace, especially a new hire named Kenny. He was ex-military, only in his late 20s, and had lost both legs. He didn't delve into what had happened, so I didn't ask. Depending on his level of pain, he either used artificial legs or shortened versions he called stubbies. He was reserved and quiet, mostly keeping to himself. But when it came to logistics, he was a master, retaining vast amounts of information and responding to complex changes with ease. One day, to my surprise, he quietly asked why I was putting up with so much nonsense. I attempted to explain my tales of woe and struggles, but immediately felt foolish considering everything he must be dealing with. He gave me a serious look. It comes down to a simple choice. Get busy living or get busy dying. Did the military instill that in you? I asked. He burst into uncontrollable laughter. Not a chance. It's too profound. It's a quote I ripped off from the film Shawshank Redemption. The British infantry version would be, "Just get on with it, you wanker." I joined in his laughter, realizing it had been months since I'd had a good laugh. I glimpsed a glimmer of hope when Maggie, an accountant at the firm, asked me out. Dating hadn't crossed my mind, so her invitation caught me off guard. I'd known Maggie for years. She was divorced but a truly lovely person. We went on a few dates before Batty caught wind of it. There were rumors that Batty had been belittling her, even calling her names, but I never had any proof. When Maggie came over to meet my kids, they behaved horribly. They ignored her at first, then started parroting their mother's negative opinions of her. I was mortified by their behavior and made sure they knew it. Maggie, being gentle by nature, became visibly upset, insisting on leaving despite my apologies. I told the kids to go back to their mothers, struggling to keep my temper in check. I tried calling Maggie numerous times, and when she finally picked up, she explained that she didn't want to create any problems with my family. It was better to end things now rather than later. I was devastated. It felt like no matter how hard I tried to do the right thing, I just kept getting knocked down. It was as if I should just throw in the towel. Then Kenny's words came back to me. I was in search of some positives in my life when Zara dropped the bombshell that Eric had promised to buy her a car and driving lessons for her 17th birthday. I was seething, but I told her that I needed to discuss it with her mother first. Zara stormed off in a huff. I called Batty to inquire how my 16-year-old daughter was on the verge of owning a car without my knowledge. You know, I wanted to be the one to teach the kids to drive, and I definitely don't want her owning a car yet, I said. Why not? It's a generous gesture from Eric. Don't be upset just because you can't afford it, Batty replied. So, you'll be fine with her cruising around to parties with her friends. Do you have any idea how many accidents involve kids her age? I wanted to ease Zara into this. Let her use our cars until she's more mature and we can trust her, I retorted. Oh well, no, I hadn't thought about that. I guess that could be a concern, Batty admitted. And since when am I cut out of all the decisions involving the kids in favor of your boyfriend? I questioned. I'm their guardian, she insisted. Wrong. We're both their parents. You just happen to have custody. Next thing I know, you'll be telling me that Jerk wants to adopt them, I said incredulously. Don't be ridiculous. I agree we should have consulted you first. I'll tell her we won't go through with it, Batty conceded. Great, so I'll be the bad guy again, ruining her chance of a car, while Eric gets to be the hero. Are you two deliberately trying to cause problems between me and Zara? Or is it just a special talent you both share? I grumbled. Of course not. Eric is just trying to be supportive and bond with the kids, Batty explained. Tell him to back off. He has you and seemingly my kids, but I'm their father. I have the right to be included in these decisions, I insisted. I'm sorry, Mike. Her words lacked sincerity, dripping with disdain. How many times are you going to apologize after making selfish decisions? Try changing your actions instead. Think about someone other than yourself. You and Eric are certainly meant for each other. You're like two peas in a pod, I retorted. What is that supposed to mean? You sound jealous, Mike. You were the one who left me, remember? If you hadn't, we would still be making these decisions together, she shot back. And you're the one who blew it. It's pointless to bring it up again. We have to do what's right for the kids. I don't want them spoiled. They should earn things and be self-sufficient. Zara can get a part-time job if she wants to save up for a car. Then we can help her, not just hand her everything on a plate, I argued. Batty's comment about not being able to afford to help angered me. That was because I was still paying the mortgage and child support. It was infuriating, especially since Eric seemed to be spending a lot of time there. Trying to deal with Batty was like repeatedly banging my head against a wall and getting the same result. I had scrimped and saved, thinking I could just barely afford it. I called Batty to confirm that the kids would be there on Friday for our weekend visitation. Surprise, surprise, they had a trip planned and forgot to mention it to me. I had to put my foot down and mention the family court before she finally agreed I could come over on Friday to see them before they left Saturday afternoon. Standing in our familiar kitchen, memories flooded back. The kids were at the table, Batty at the counter, just like old times. I brought up the idea of a holiday, the one we had dreamed of for years, a European road trip in the summer. Tom was keen on via Ferretta climbs and adventure sports in the Alps. It wouldn't be cheap, but I was willing to spend all I had and even borrow more. The kids were excited, discussing the places we could visit. Finally, a positive response, just as I had hoped for. I noticed Batty looking pensive. That was supposed to be our family holiday, Mike. We planned it together. Well, we can't do it together now. And it's probably our last chance before Zara starts vacationing with friends, I replied. Just then, Eric sauntered into the kitchen like he owned the place. Tom eagerly shared our plans with him. Eric nodded approvingly. Sounds great, he said. Then he added, I guess we'll do our holiday another time. All three of them turned to him simultaneously, asking, What holiday? I was thinking of a summer-long trip across the United States, Eric explained. You guys can pick the route, but it could include Disney, then hopping over to the West Coast, hitting Leh, and driving the Pacific Coast Highway. Zara interjected excitedly. Oh my God, that sounds like an amazing trip. Could we add New York to it? Tom replied, Don't see why not. We could stop there for a few days on the way back to Blighty to break up the flights. Tom immediately launched into questions about the rides at Universal and whether they could also visit Busch Gardens or a Six Flags park. He was a big fan of thrill rides. In that moment, I couldn't have hated anyone more. He knew he had me. I could hardly insist on a lesser trip when they were so thrilled. I stood up and quietly walked out of the kitchen, doubting anyone even noticed me leaving. As I reached my car door, Batty caught up with me. I'm sorry about your trip, she said. Answer me honestly, Batty. Is this the first you've heard of this holiday? Well, yes, I don't think Eric had the chance to tell us about it. I'm sorry it conflicts with your plans. Come on, Batty, you're not that knave. He just made it up on the spot, and I can bet nothing is booked. He's taking my kids away from me, and you're aiding him. What did I do to deserve this? I'm sure it's just an innocent mistake. I've had enough. You keep apologizing and then repeat the same actions. So here's what's going to happen. Tell your boyfriend this. The next time I face any issues with access to my children or being excluded from parenting decisions, I'll take it up with him directly. Are you threatening us? Mike. Talking to you is like talking to a wall. So yeah, I'm trying a different approach and we'll deal with the consequences. You wouldn't harm us. Maybe not you, though you deserve it, but he's due some payback. You and he should think carefully before putting someone in a position with nothing to lose, and that's exactly where you've put me. I glanced up to see Eric standing at the door. I half expected him to attack me, considering he was bigger, but he just scurried back inside the house. I noticed the disappointment on Batty's face, although she quickly masked it. You see, a real man doesn't resort to threats of violence. No, it seems he just runs away. I took a breath, turning to Batty. Are you trying to gain their favor and push me away? They're my kids, not his. I like to think I'm a good dad. You should want me involved instead of playing these pathetic games. Batty seemed at a loss for words. It's not. You err. This shouldn't be a competition, but let's be honest. You've won. I've lost. You have the house, the money, our friends, the rich boyfriend, and the kids. But your winning doesn't mean I have to lose every time, Batty. The old Batty would have realized that long before me. She just stood there, mouth open, unable to speak. For God's sake, I give up. I want to talk to the kids again tomorrow without that jerk. I got into my car and drove off, leaving Batty standing there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Before entering, I made sure Eric wasn't around. The kids slouched on the couch in our old living room, looking like it took great effort, while Batty stood at the doorway. Don't worry, I won't take up much of your time. There was no verbal response, but Tom managed to look up at me. I know the breakup is hard for you both, and I wanted to remind you how much I love you. Your mom does too. That will never change. Batty looked surprised that I had included her. But I don't understand what's happening with you guys. I can barely recognize you these days. You're great kids, but now you've developed this snotty attitude like nothing is good enough. I love you to bits, but I deserve better than to be messed around. If you want to move on with your mom and Eric, I will back off. If you want stuff and big holidays, Then Eric is your man. What I won't do is show up every weekend to hear some lame excuse about you being busy. Batty tried to interrupt. I hardly think. Yeah, well, I've heard enough of what you think, and I am talking to my kids potentially for one of the last times. I can't buy you the things he does, but I'd still like to spend time with you both, do sports, go camping, whatever it is you want. I know it's not Florida or wherever, but it would be us together. And you'll both be off to college in no time at all. Still, no response other than looking awkward and fidgeting. The way you guys behaved with Maggie was unforgivable. What gives you the right to treat someone in that manner? That is not how we brought you up. I have never been so embarrassed by my own family. I hope you are all happy. She won't have anything to do with me. Batty riled at that. Well, she wasn't good enough. She. Really, Batty? What did she ever do to you? She's a lovely person, and all she did was agree to go out with me. You were supportive when we married, and I never criticized Eric. But well done. You've scared her off. All because you're worried about my psycho ex-wife and kids. I winced, realizing I had said all of that, and sworn in front of the kids. Both Zara and Tom looked shocked. That information seemed to be a revelation to them. Turning to Batty, I continued, and another thing. Thanks to Eric rubbing lack of funds into my face, I checked with the child maintenance agency, and they reckon I should have offset the mortgage against some of the child support. So you can expect an assessment and revision. Maybe Loverboy can step up and pay towards my house that he seems to be living in. Zora piped up, looking at her mom. Dad's still paying. Her voice trailed off, and Batty was back to her goldfish impression. The kids didn't look much brighter. It didn't seem like I was going to get a response out of any of them. I stood up in frustration once again, mumbled something about letting me know, and left. I returned to my cramped apartment, pondering if I could afford to move elsewhere. I hadn't mentioned to Batty that my lawyer advised me to continue with the mortgage payments and reduce the child support. It ensured a roof over my kids' heads, but he suggested it might also turn out to be a good investment with property prices soaring. Eventually, when Tom moved out in a few years, she would either have to sell or buy me out. My phone rang, and it was Zora. I found myself wondering what new challenge life had in store for me. Hi, Zora, I answered. She quickly explained that Tom was also on the line. She spoke rapidly. We figured out that we owe you 6 weekends and 4 weeks of vacation, and we were wondering if you still wanted to go on that tour through Europe this summer. We could visit the Black Forest, see the Alps, and travel down through Italy. Her words tumbled out in a nervous rush. Do you remember those places? Of course, we've talked about it for years, and it should be a lot warmer than Scotland. And Dad, well, we're sorry about how we acted. Mom never mentioned that it was her who cheated. We thought it was you, and that it must have been with Maggie. And Eric made it sound like he was paying for everything after you left us. I don't care as long as I can be with my kids again. Tom chimed in. You're wrong about Eric. We don't really like him. He's a jerk. I tried not to laugh. Really, I did. That's not the impression you gave me, Tom. We thought that if you weren't seeing us, well, that you might come back. That is never going to happen, Tom. Things are over between me and your mom. She's moved on, but I want to be there for you both. Zara took over for Tom. The thing is, Dad, we think Mom feels the same way. Eric isn't really around that much, but he shows up when you're supposed to pick us up. They argue a lot, and it's often about you. I find that hard to believe. Your mom's been nothing but a thorn. She's been difficult to deal with since we split. I'd go as far as to say she hates me. I don't think so, Dad. I think she knows she made a mistake. I sat in Batty's human resources office at work, my nose throbbing, attempting to prevent blood from staining the luxurious carpet beneath me. Batty's expression was one of fury as she entered the room. Jesus, Mike, fighting at work is gross misconduct. I will have to dismiss you. What's the matter, afraid of losing out on child support? I retorted. It's pathetic, grown men fighting. You realize we had to call an ambulance for Clinton. Good. He deserved it. I think I did quite well considering there were 3 of them. Grow up, Mike. This is a total disaster. It's so bad. The old man is coming in. Suddenly, Eric burst into the room. I tried to suppress a smirk at his swollen lip and bruised cheek. He immediately began demanding that the police be called and the assault reported, in addition to my immediate dismissal, claiming that he and half of his team had been attacked. I looked at Batty. Do you want to know what actually happened before you sacked me? I thought that was your job, after all. A deep voice resonated across the room. I do. I turned to see Old Man Harold, the chairman and founder of Harold Engineering. He rarely visited the factory these days, but still exuded an imposing presence and reputation. Strangely, Kenny was standing next to him. Eric launched into an explanation. It was an unprovoked attack in the canteen against me and 2 of my team. An unprovoked attack by 1 man taking on 3 seems a bit odd, don't you think? Is that what happened, Mike? Harold inquired. Well, I probably swung first, but seeing as I was outnumbered, I wasn't going to wait around. I confessed. I thought I saw Harold stifling a smile. Batty interjected. We will have no option but to dismiss you and call the police, Mike. You had already threatened Eric. I heard it myself. Nothing somebody says can justify an assault. Shouldn't you ask what provoked it? I interjected. I presume it's jealousy over mine and Eric's relationship, Batty replied. No, it's been months of harassment by him and the guys from his department, Eric exclaimed, almost hyperventilating. That's total rubbish and just a pathetic excuse, Eric retorted. Kenny spoke up then. I can confirm everything Mike said is true. Eric looked at him with disdain. Who the hell are you? If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your nose out of other people's business. Harold intervened. Kenny is my grandson, and I believe him all day long over someone like you. I got over my surprise and produced my phone, skipping back and pressing play. Hey, Cucky, our boss was late in this morning. He was probably giving your missus a good scene too. The recording played out. Everyone in the room shifted uncomfortably. I caught the look Batty gave Eric. I flipped through the notes again. You know she slept with him for months before you 2 broke up, right? Did you know that? Are you one of those people who likes to see your wife openly cheating? Batty's face turned crimson, while Eric shouted, This is total bullshit. I skipped back again. The next voice was Clinton's. It's a shame you were late for work all those times, Mike, and you didn't get the manager's role. I looked at Batty. Have you ever known me to be late for work, ever in all the time we've been here? He blocked it and told me so, told me to move away as it would happen every time. I switched to the recording from the dining room. It was Clinton Morgan's voice. Eric says she's great at what she does and really likes it. Once he gets her up to speed, we'll have a little party with all the guys. Maybe we can even get that cute little girl of yours involved. The sound of scuffling and the fight followed before the recording cut off. It was the last comment I reacted to. You're still the mother of my kids, and the mention of Zara. Batty glared at Eric, who shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know that idiot Clinton was going to say that. He was just trying to wind him up. Old Man Harold's voice cut through the tension. Officially, everyone involved is suspended pending investigation and disciplinary hearings. Unofficially, Turner, get out of my building and take your buddies with you. Anyone calling the police will never work in the industry again. You're on borrowed time anyway. Worst appointment I ever made. Don't even think about contacting me. You'll regret it. He nodded at a security guard outside the door, who promptly came in and escorted Eric away. Turning to me, Harold said, in light of everything, I'd say you handled it well, but you should have come to me. Go home, Mike. Get cleaned up. Batty, we need to talk. I can't believe this type of behavior has gone unnoticed. Even ignoring your role in things as HR director, you should have been aware of what was happening. Tears streamed down Maddie's cheeks. You do know it's not true, Mike. It wasn't months, it was once, and I regretted it as soon as it happened. I walked out with Kenny and thanked him for both the backup and the advice, offering to buy him a pint or many. I'd love to, but I have to travel for a regiment thing on Sunday. I usually just take myself off into the hills for some peace, but they've roped me in for something official. No trouble next time, though. And what's that about the old man being your granddad? I didn't like to broadcast it or take advantage. I was going to mention your troubles to him, but I figured you needed to find your own solution, and then I'd help. After all, he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. I started laughing. Now I know that one is an old army quote, if you count Shakespeare and Henry V. Kenny chuckled. That's the one, band of brothers. They used it in officer training. It was a bit highbrow for the rest of us. Batty arrived at my flat that night, and though I let her in reluctantly, I couldn't help but inquire about Harold. He confirmed Eric's involvement, along with the other two in the fight. They're all being dismissed. Others in the team admitted to your harassment and claimed Eric put them up to it. I received a reprimand and a final written warning. Are they taking this to the police? No. The guys admitted to the harassment but want to keep it quiet. They're saying it was just a disagreement that got out of hand. Did you talk to Eric? Ask him why. He wanted you gone because he thought I still had feelings for you. He admitted the conversations were meant to push you to snap and get you fired, but you never took the bait. You just ignored them. Is he out of his mind? You don't cheat, lie, and treat someone like crap if you love them. You've been treating me horribly for months. I'd go as far as to say you even enjoy seeing me in pain. Batty burst into tears. None of this was supposed to happen. It was a mistake, and you weren't supposed to find out. You weren't supposed to leave me. Everything went wrong. I thought if you missed the kids and your life was miserable, you might give me another chance, but it didn't happen. Eric was just a tool to make you jealous. I don't have any real feelings for him. So you acted like a jerk because you wanted me back. Seriously, take responsibility for your actions. Batty, you caused all of this. I don't recognize you anymore. The woman I married would never have done those things. She was kind and caring. Where did she go? I messed up when I realized you weren't coming back. After the divorce, I felt like I had to follow through. The kids, our friends, and my family wouldn't believe what I had done. Steve and Will refused to be in the same room as us. I haven't seen their wives or families in months. I had to prove I could make it work with him. Otherwise, I had thrown everything away for nothing. I had to prove I made the right decision, and that he was the better man. My life with Eric had to seem perfect, and the more I diminished you, the better my decisions would appear. I tried to make it seem like a love affair, but it was never that. He was arrogant and selfish, but by then, there was no going back. What a mess, and you got the kids involved in all this. I am so sorry. I needed to try to make things right, but I had no idea how. I didn't realize how badly it affected your relationship with them. Great, yet another apology. I've heard what you said. I will change my actions, so I don't need to keep apologizing. At least it's over with him. He's gone now. And I need you. And so do the kids. They're really angry with me. I thought maybe we could try again. I've never stopped loving you. I couldn't believe it. I was so certain she hated me. It gave me pause for thought, but not for long. There's no way back, Batty, not for me. The bond and trust we had are gone. I'm not trying to hurt you, just trying my best to cope and get my life back on track. I joined Steve and Will for a pint on Sunday morning, and they immediately laid into me for not returning their calls and texts. I tried to explain, but with our wives being close and Eric being Will's brother, it wasn't that simple. Will chuckled. He's no brother of mine. I haven't spoken to the guy since that night in the pub. Probably for the best, or I'd have knocked him out. Steve elaborated that the wives hadn't seen much of Batty at first, but they were in touch now, and she claimed to regret everything. She thought if she hadn't gone back to Eric and had been more reasonable, we might have reconciled. I wasn't entirely convinced, but it felt good to reconnect with friends. As we delved into other topics, I glanced up at the TV and saw Kenny in his full Royal Fusiliers uniform, laying a wreath at the Synodif in front of royalty and dignitaries. He was adorned with medals, including the Victoria Cross. I turned up the volume to hear the commentary recounting how Kenny had earned the Victoria Cross, rescuing fellow soldiers under heavy fire and repeatedly risking his life before being knocked unconscious by a rocket-propelled grenade. The commentary detailed his struggles through recovery. I was stunned. I hadn't realized the extent of what Kenny and others had gone through. My own problems suddenly seemed insignificant. Life took a turn for the better once Batty and I sorted things out. I started spending more time with the kids than before, catching up on their activities and games. Our custody arrangement became flexible, allowing them to stay with me whenever they wanted, and they always seemed happy to be around. The child maintenance service reduced my payments as suggested, which helped balance out the mortgage. At work, I earned a promotion and a hefty bonus, thanks to Harold's desire to avoid any legal trouble. With things settling down, I found myself rekindling old hobbies and planning trips. So you can imagine my surprise when Maggie showed up at my new place. We hadn't spoken in months, and I didn't think she knew where I lived. Welcoming her in with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity, I asked, "What brings you here, Maggie?" "I'm here on behalf of Zara and Tom," she explained. "They apologized and filled me in on everything. Zara mentioned you weren't seeing anyone. How did they even find you?" I wondered. "Batty probably gave them my number," Maggie replied. I spoke to her, and she confirmed what the kids said, acknowledging that we both needed to move on. Things were getting surreal. "It seems both your kids and your ex-wife think highly of you, Mike," Maggie said. "They think I'd be a fool not to go out with you." Sliced bread. That seems a bit exaggerated, don't you think? I chuckled. Maybe more like the best thing since the steam engine. Sorry, it's an engineering thing. I'd argue for the calculator or computers, Maggie quipped. After all, I'm an accountant, but I'd like to find out for myself. Mike. Yeah, I'd like that too, Maggie, I replied earnestly. And so we started dating again. Our relationship grew from friendship and companionship to passion and intimacy, the kind of things money can't buy. Where it will lead only time will tell, but for now things are going well. Was it luck that brought us back together? Perhaps, but I like to believe that by no longer playing the victim, I opened myself to better fortune. I stopped tolerating the nonsense others threw my way and relearned how to stand up for myself. So far, the results have been fantastic, but I'll never take it for granted. Life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. I hope Kenny's story is received with open hearts. With Remembrance Day approaching, thoughts turn to the significance of this day. It often feels like one of the rare instances where we truly honor our veterans. Kenny's story offered insight into Mike's struggles and spurred him to take action. The Victoria Cross stands as the highest military honor for valor in the United Kingdom. Yet, in the last 50 years, only 6 Victoria Crosses have been awarded, with 4 of them given posthumously. Meanwhile, thousands of veterans face adversity every single day. The phrase, "get on with it, you wanker," demands sensitivity. It's clear that there should be a greater emphasis on supporting men's mental health, whether they are veterans or not, lest we forget. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.